Hello, and welcome back to Bumblebee, everyone. I hope you're ready for some creepy crawlies because today's list is the top 10 messed up criminals you never knew about. This doctor can only prescribe doom. It's Dr. Harold Shipman. Shipman has been a well-respected and liked general practitioner and considered a pillar of the community, the way that all good serial killers are, until another GP surgeon began to get suspicious of Shipman's patients having a high mortality rate. It was then revealed that Shipman had been killing dozens of his patients, actually 215 to 250 to be precise, and had done so for years, almost completely undetected. In fact, some believe his count may actually be closer to 500. Shipman killed remorselessly, but it's likely he only ever did it for kicks and thrills and knowing he was getting away with it. Shipman was caught after suspicions being raised after a will from one of his patients he killed cited him as the sole heir, cutting out her own family. Shipman forged this will, his ego thinking somehow he'd get away with it. Of course it would make sense for a stranger to leave her whole life to me. Her doctor she has no personal relationship with. I'm me, I'm perfect. Shipman was found guilty for 15 murders and 1 count of fraud, being sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, and he took his own life in a cell in 2004, never confessing to his crimes or giving a reason for all the overcompensating granny theft. Fire festival, but make it 16th century. The BATAVIA. Alright, so this has some Lord of the Flies energy for sure. The BATAVIA was a ship bound for the West Indies carrying 341 people, a mix of civilians, soldiers, and working men. So tensions are high from day one. Lot of dudes, not many chicks, no firm leading hand to guide the ship socially, and then wham! Ship crashes on June 4th of 1629. They had managed to rescue some of the provisions from the wreck, including barrels of biscuits and some water, but the commander Pelsat and some crew ditch these 268 other losers and go find fresh water and help, which takes them 33 days to reach. In the meantime, those 33 days on the island are enough for Cornelius to decide to build a weird empire. Firstly, he tricks a party into believing that water could be found on the Seals Island. Upon landing there in their little ship, the group found no water. Cornelius then sends his henchmen to finish them off. Next, he drowned people by sending them out in boats on useless errands where his accomplices would push them overboard. Then, he instructed a group of soldiers under the command of Weeb Hayes to go explore the High Island. Before they left, he confiscated all their arms. He didn't expect them to return. After all, that was the same direction which Pelsat had gone 30-some days ago, and he never came back. Lo and behold, a smoke signal means Hayes did find water, which complicates matters for Cornelius. He was in danger of them warning any approaching rescue ship of his Lord of the Flies actions he'd been doing. He tries to woo Hayes over to the dark side. Hayes says, nah bro, island living. So Cornelius tries to duke it out and loses spectacularly to Hayes, who locks his ass up. Pelsat takes 63 days to find the wreck site again, almost double the time it took the ship's boat to get to Batavia. When he arrives, he learned of Cornelius had killed and pilfered and enslaved those around him and condemned the mutineers to have their right hands cut off. In the case of Cornelius, both, before being put to death on gallows. Double trouble with these sisters, Delfina and Maria de Jesus Gonzalez. Doesn't that just roll off the tongue? At least a lot better than most prolific murder partnership, which is the title given by the Guinness World of Records in a dubious honor to their horrific 91 known slayings. They shopped from home, pulling victims from the brothel El Rancho de Angel that they ran in Mexico. There's not much information on the Gonzalez family, despite the fact that the sisters were actually caught alongside their 2 other sisters who were seen as accomplices, and that their crimes were committed in the 21st century, where police and scientific progress can provide a lot more detail. The police picked up a woman named Josefina Gutierrez, a procuress, on suspicion of devious behavior in the Guantero area, and during questioning, she implicated the 2 sisters' crimes. Police officers searched the sisters' property and found the bodies of 11 men and 80 women, a total of over 91 people. Investigations revealed the sisters' scheme was that of to recruit women through help wanted ads, though the ads would state the girls would become maids for the 2 sisters, not adult services in a brothel. Many of the girls are force-fed substances once they arrived, and the sisters reportedly killed the girls when they became too ill, too physically damaged, lost their looks, or stopped pleasing customers. They would also do anything to customers that showed up with large amounts of cash, asked too many questions, saw too many of their girls, or were just kicking it around too much. And when asked for an explanation for deaths of family and friends, one sister reportedly said to People the food didn't agree with them. Both received 40-year sentences in 1964. This would probably be the worst plumbing call to ever receive, so let's visit Dennis Nilsen. As a miserable junior constable in London, he began to drink alone in the evenings and began visiting gay bars where he engaged in casual liaisons with other men, having fought the long fight of accepting his own sexual identity. A year later, he left the police and began to work as a civil servant in a job center. Between the years of 1978 and 1983, Dennis Nilsen is known to have killed a minimum of 12 men and is believed to have attempted on further 7 people. At first, Nilsen kept the bodies under the floorboards of his Melrose apartment until they had decomposed too much to gain gratification from, and they emitted the gnarly scent of rotten person that attracted insects. He therefore decided to burn all of them in a bonfire in his garden, disguising the smell with a melting car tire too. In mid-1981, Nilsen's landlord decided to renovate the ground floor apartment, offering him $1,000 to vacate, which he happily accepted before burning the last few bodies he was retaining. Dennis moved to 23 Cranley Gardens in London, where he went from a floorboard storage to attempting to dispose of flesh organs and smaller bones by shoving them down a toilet. Seeing as toilets can't even handle a tampon, it consequently blocked all the pipes, which surprisingly led to Nilsen himself calling an emergency draining company. Imagine that poor employee looking down the toilet bowl and having an eyeball look back. That's essentially what happened too. When the plumber noticed the blockage, human remains, and immediately called the police, putting an end to Dennis Nilsen's murder spree. Hotel Hell was also called the H.H. Holmes Hotel, and it was literally built with the single goal of killing folks for sport. My American Horror Story fans may know, but this legendary building is the inspiration for their season Hotel, alongside the Cecil, of course. While it remains unknown how many people Holmes killed in this house of horrors, he once boasted of killing 27. However, some estimates claim the actual number could have been as low as 9 or as high as 200. Like I said, there ain't much info. For his mansion, H.H. Holmes planned the first floor to contain an entire block of storefronts that he would be able to rent out to the flood of new businesses opening in the city. The third floor would contain apartments for new residents looking to make it in the big windy city. Eerily, for some of those unsuspecting residents, they may have eventually become Holmes' victims. Those victims got to see the second floor, one that was allegedly full of asphyxiation chambers and mazes and hidden stairs. There were hinged walls and false partitions. Some rooms had 5 doors and others had none. Secret airless chambers were found underneath floorboards, and iron plate-lined walls appeared to stifle all sound. The first clue about this bizarre floor plan's true purpose came to the cops in a pile of bones, and when the authorities descended into the cellar, the scope of the building's hidden horrors were revealed. Beside a blood-soaked operating table, they found women's clothes, surgical surfaces, a crematorium, and an array of medical tools and bizarre devices. For the most part, Holmes represented himself at his trial, displaying his classic grace and a remarkable familiarity with the law, according to one paper at the time. However, his charm wasn't enough for the jurors, and he unanimously was sentenced to death. This is the strangest thing on our countdown by a long shot: the horse. It's a rare kind of story that manages to walk that fine line between disturbing and hilarious. The Em and Claw horse intercourse case was a series of incidents in 2005 involving Kenneth Pinion, James Michael Tate, and other unidentified men. So you may be wondering, hey Teresa, how does this actually even happen? Great question. So, it starts when Pinion loses his ability to experience certain sensation in the body after a motorcycle accident, and he began to seek out sexual extremism to fill that void. The internet's a deep and scary place, and on there, Pinion finds a community of men called zoos who would meet up in farms for communal weekends of animal fun. They train the horses to participate even, and I'm not going to tell you how. Research this nightmare yourself. Pinion is killed on a farm northwest of Em and Claw, according to Governor John Urquhart of the sheriff's office. He said that typically the men were horsing around with the same horse on the property of James Michael Tate, but on this particular night, it's my understanding the horse wasn't particularly receptive, so the men had to go elsewhere. Having snuck into a barn and gotten up to whatever they do, Pinion sustains internal injuries from this not usual horse and is dropped off naked from a speeding car in front of Em and Claw Community Hospital on July 2nd of 2005, where he's declared deceased on site from colon perforation. Reported in the Seattle Times, it was one of the paper's most read stories of 2005. Pinion's death was rapidly prompted to enact the bill of Washington State Legislature that prohibits both intercourse with animals and the videotaping of such an act, with jail time and fines as penalties. Persecutors also later determined that the horses hadn't been injured. Meet the real-life Jigsaw toy box killer. David Ray Parker became known as the toy box killer following the chilling discovery of his sadistic chamber in 1999. Dude went full Jigsaw before any of the horror movies even happened. He soundproofed a truck trailer, which he called his toy box, where he tortured and assaulted victims, telling them exactly what he was going to do to them in explicit detail while they were restrained, and he even went as far as putting mirrors on the ceiling and walls because he wanted them to see what was happening. He didn't even kill all of his victims. Rather, when he was done with some of them, he would heavily dose them with an intensely powerful drug and then drop them somewhere. One of his victims actually didn't remember what happened at all and thought she was having horrific reoccurring nightmares until she finally put the pieces together and realized what would happen, and no one believed her. It's estimated he killed up to 60 victims in New Mexico. Many of the bodies were never recovered as they were and dumped in undisclosed locations. Parker also made recordings of his victims' demise and showed no remorse for his crimes, explaining, "It was a source of entertainment that made me create these tapes." His final intended victim luckily managed to escape with her life after 3 days of agony and report David to police. What can only be described as despicable, the hi-fi slayings. They still shock today, and honestly they could probably top this list and really any others when it comes to true evil human beings. In 1974, 3 men, Dale Selby, William Andrew, and Keith Roberts, entered hi-fi shop in Ogden just before closing time, holding store workers 20-year-old Stanley Walker and 18-year-old Michelle Ansley hostage in the basement as they robbed the store. 16-year-old Byron Nasbitt enters the store with impeccably wrong timing as he was running errands and was also taken hostage. Both Byron's mother, Carolyn Peterson Nasbitt, and Stanley fathers Orrin Walker arrive at the store to look for their children who had yet to return for over an hour. Now they suffered the same captive fate. What happened is unimaginable and some of the most unnecessary human violence that has ever happened. The robbers forced the group to drink corrosive drain cleaner in an ill attempt to end their lives. All it does is cause them agony and screams. This is the breaking point for it falling apart, and the robbers panicked and really lost control. Their attempted methods of killing hostages became bizarre and more ineffective. They shot at them, they brought a pen into the mix and put it through someone's ear. They just ended up choosing to finish loading the van and leave. That's right, they just leave. There's no police outside forcing them to do all this. There's no need to kill these people other than panic. The 2 surviving victims sustained permanent life-changing injuries, and these twisted killers were executed by lethal injection. The Otaku killer may genuinely not have had a soul. His one true companion was his grandfather, so when he died, it wasn't totally strange to his family that Miyazaki transformed. Just not to this extreme. They reported he had begun spying on his little sisters, and then he attacked them when he was confronted about it. At one point he even attacked his mother for an argument they had. Miyazaki then admitted that he had eaten some of his grandfather's ashes after he'd been cremated in order to feel closer with him. In August of 1988, just one day after his 26th birthday, he abducts his first victim, Mary Cano. For several weeks the body decomposes, and then he checks in on it periodically. Eventually he removed parts of it to keep at home. He would also call her family and breathe deeply into the phone. Later he sent them a note and a box full of their daughter's bone dust. When the police announced this on the news, he sends them another taunting letter. His second victim is abducted in October of 1988 and again left the body in the woods while he took the victim's clothing with him. Within the next 8 months, the killer would escalate to 2 more, and they would go missing in the same manners. Otaku would drink their blood and sometimes dine on their remains. The Otaku killer was finally apprehended when he was attempting his 5th kidnapping. The girl's older sister tells their father of a strange man, and the father goes and quite literally jumps Miyazaki to save his daughter. Mia gets away but idiotically returns to the park where his car was, and the police ambush him. Miyazaki, who retained a perpetually calm, collected demeanor throughout his trial, appeared indifferent to his capture. When asked about his crimes, he blamed them on the Rat Man, an alter ego that lived inside him and forced him to do terrible things. He was given death penalty in 2008. The uncaught offender of California. Once unnamed, Joseph James D'Angelo was found to be the face of the original Night Stalker, an uncaught serial offender for a long series of home invasions in Sacramento in 1976. He's actually responsible for at least 3 separate crime sprees throughout the state, each of which spawned different nicknames in the press before it became evident they were committed by one person. The Visalia Ransacker, Earons, the Night Stalker, followed by the original Night Stalker since Ramirez came along and snatched up that jazzy title. He frequently breaks into homes in the daytime prior to committing the attack and would do things like unload the household weapons, leave pieces of rope, remove screens from windows, cut phone lines. He'd also call the victims before and after their attacks. He was known for his taunting and threatening of both victims and police in obscene phone calls and written communications, and one of the more chilling instances is at a community meeting in Sacramento regarding the attacks. A man stands up and declares he would protect his wife if the attacker came into their home next. Lo and behold, that couple is victimized next. He was there and must have followed them home. In 1978, he begins attacking all throughout Northern California, and then in 79, he vanishes. In the late 1990s, DNA revealed he moved to Southern California and became a starting December of 79 there. He committed 10 murders and ranged from the Goleta to Dana Point region. On April 24th of 2018, the state of California charged the 72-year-old with 8 counts of first degree based upon DNA evidence. Investigators identified members of D'Angelo's family through forensic genealogy. D'Angelo couldn't be charged with his 1970s SAs, but he was charged with the 2018 ones and 13 kidnappings and abduction attempts. Alright, thank you once again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe to see see more content and comment down below on what criminal you've heard of that you think may be the worst.